Thank you, Mr. Matthew Petticock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to wind up this second reading debate, and I pay tribute at the outset to all those who contributed to it. Sadly, it's not possible to recognise all the impressive contributions that have been made over the course of this two-day debate, but I would like to single out and congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Bury North, on the birth of his son, and my honourable friend, the member for Canterbury, on her excellent maiden speech, one in which she brought home to the House not only her love for her constituency, but also how much it benefits from economic and cultural exchange with our partners in Europe. Mr. Speaker, a large number of contributors have stressed the historic nature of this debate, and they were right to do so. The bill before us is one of the most constitutionally significant pieces of legislation in our country's history, and in practical terms will facilitate one of the largest legislative projects ever undertaken by Parliament. The maturity and seriousness of much of the debate that has taken place has rightly reflected the significance of the issues at stake. The opposition accept that the Brexit process requires legislation to disentangle the UK from the European Union's legal structures and to ensure we have a functioning statute book on the day we leave. Indeed, we acknowledge that this is an essential step if we're to avoid the most chaotic of departures, and as such the Secretary of State is absolutely right to argue that every honourable member has a shared interest in getting the legislation right. As many honourable members have rightly argued, this bill is not about whether Brexit takes place. As the Secretary of State made clear in his opening remarks last week, the bill in itself will not determine whether or not we leave the EU. That decision was taken on the 23rd of June 2016 in the referendum and was given effect by the triggering of Article 50. An act of notification itself only possible because this House and these benches overwhelmingly backed the government's EU notification of withdrawal bill. What is at issue is how we leave, the role of Parliament in that process, and the precedents that we set. And as the Right Honourable Learned Member for Rushcliffe argued in a characteristically incisive speech on the first day, the question is not whether a bill of this kind is necessary, but whether this particular form of the bill is remotely acceptable. Quite simply, Mr. Speaker, we do not believe it is. Of the significant number of speakers that have taken part in this debate, only the most cavalier have failed to remark upon the flawed nature of the legislation before us. And as my Right Honourable Learned friend, the member for Holborn and St Pancras, so forensically exposed last week, those flaws are not just serious, they are fundamental. The deficiencies in our system of delegated legislation have been remarked upon by many, not least in the powerful contributions made by my honourable friends, the members for Rhondda, the City of Durham and High Peak. But the delegated powers conferred on ministers in clauses 7, 8 and 9 are extraordinary in their constitutional potency and scope. And in the case of clause 9, as a number of honourable members have mentioned, can theoretically be used to amend the Act itself, with only the most basic restrictions to act as safeguards against an overweening executive. And because clause 9 allows for the use of sweeping powers in respect of the implementation of the withdrawal agreement, this bill allows all aspects of such an agreement, including the divorce bill, to be agreed by ministers with the least possible scrutiny in this place. Clause 17 is a power so extensive in its potential application that it could extend to every facet of our national life, and as a consequence opens up the possibility of changes to vast areas of law without full parliamentary process. As my right honourable friend, the member for Normanton, Pontefract and Castleford put it in her passionate contribution, these are powers that would make a Tudor monarch proud. And to those who believe that we can merely correct those powers, put through enhanced scrutiny at committee stage and the bill will be fixed, I would say that the sweeping powers in this bill are not its only weakness. The provisions in this bill as it stands rule out a sensible transitional arrangement. Far from delivering clarity on the status and nature of EU-derived law, the bill is riddled with ambiguities that will create deep uncertainty as how this body of law will apply after incorporation. In ruling out the Charter of Fundamental Rights for purely ideological reasons, The bill could mean that individuals and businesses are unable to assert the rights that the bill has elsewhere sought to maintain. And in its treatment of the devolved institutions, the bill risks further destabilising the union between the four nations of the United Kingdom. In short, it is a fundamentally flawed piece of legislation, and the Right Honourable and Learned Member for Beaconsfield was right to refer to it in his contribution as an astonishing monstrosity. As he put it in an article in the Evening Standard on Thursday, the bill as it stands seeks to confer powers on the government to carry out Brexit, and I quote, in breach of our constitutional principles in a manner that no sovereign parliament should allow. And so, Mr. Speaker, the central question before each member of the House this evening is whether they truly believe that the government accepts just how deficient this bill is, whether they trust ministers to cooperate in rectifying its many deficiencies, and whether, as a consequence, they are confident that it can be made watertight in the 8 days that the programme motion allocates for committee stage. Whether, in short, honourable members believe it is feasible and probable that the breathtaking tapestry of sweeping delegated powers woven into this legislation can be unpicked and the bill made good, or whether it is so deeply flawed that the government, as my right honourable friend the member for Leeds Central put it in a brilliant speech, should simply go away and do their homework again. Mr. Speaker, the truth is that we do not need to legislate in this fashion in order to achieve the necessary aims that lie behind the bill. And the government, if we're honest, all of us, should not have put honourable members on both sides of the House in this position. Ministers have known for a considerable period of time of the real and genuinely held concerns about the approach the bill takes. The opposition raised concerns following the publication of the White Paper. We reiterated those concerns when the bill was first published, and in a letter to the Secretary of State at the start of the month, called again for constructive engagement. And while many on the benches opposite will no doubt all too readily dismiss the concerns we have raised, those concerns have been echoed for some time by voices on the government benches, as well as parliamentary committees and numerous non-parliamentary organisations. In short, the government have had ample time to make clear that they are willing to correct the flaws in this bill and to bring forward amendments that show they mean it. And yet only now we are told that ministers are in listening mode and are open to ideas for constructive improvements to the bill. We're asked, in a sense, as many honourable members have noted, to take it on trust that conversations will be held and that we'll have assurances down the line about how ministers will use the powers in these bills. And yet the Secretary of State, in his opening remarks, defended the wording of the bill as it stands and offered no concrete concessions that might reassure honourable members across the House. Given this government's track record, which a number of my honourable friends have highlighted in their remarks, we needed proof of real movement. We need more than vague offers to talk at committee stage. Mr. Speaker, many of us remain utterly bewildered as to why the legislation has been drafted in this form, or why ministers felt it was wise to ignore the Select Committee's call to publish the bill in draft so that its flaws could be addressed before we reach this point. The unique challenge of disentangling the UK from the EU's legal structures and ensuring we have a functioning statute book on the day we leave required a bill that created consensus across this House, not one that undermines it. It required a bill that restored power to this House of Commons, not a bill that concentrates unparalleled power in the hands of the executive. We all agree, all of us across this House, that a bill of this kind is necessary. But that does not mean that Parliament should accept this fundamentally flawed bill. And it is for that reason, and that reason alone, that the opposition will be voting against this bill this evening.
Lord Chancellor and Secretary